Okay. All right. So, oh wait, I got to pull off the screen. All right. So let's start where we ended off last time, which was no, not there, not there, not there, not there, not there. Hmm. Wait, what's this? No, 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 no. Where is it? Ah, here we go. Okay, let me pull up the screen. Share screen. Okay. All right. So this is where we left off. We were talking about Karen Ophel, and if it rains so much that you can stick your hands and feet in the water when standing on Karen Ophel, then that's actually too much water, and you should you should actually ask God to refrain from any more water. Then we continue. We have a verse. This is from, actually, we read this yesterday. V'natati gishmechem bi'itam. This is part of the blessings. If we follow God's rules, then God will give us rain in their season. Well, okay, what does that mean? And we're told lo shikora v'lo tzmeya, not basically not too much or too little, ela benoni, just right. Shekol zman shageshamim merubin mitash tishin et haaretz ve'ina motzia peirot. For as long as the rains are abundant, when they are abundant, they muddy the soil of the land, and it doesn't give the produce properly. Davar acher, when it says rain in its seasons, bi'itam belelei reviot uvelelei shabbatot. Now here he translates it initially in a very literal way. On the night of the fourth day of the week, which is Tuesday night, Wednesday day, uvalele Shabbatot, and then Friday night. But then he gives us an explanation that Riviot, Rivi'ah is also a word. So Reva is four in Hebrew. So Rivi'i is the fourth. But Rivi'ah can also be rainy season, as we've seen earlier in the text. So he says it's another possibility is that in its season means rain comes when it's expected. Either right before, so one possibility, I mean, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense. Why is in its season Tuesday night to Wednesday? He says, well, it could be because it's wait, what does he say? He explains this is the nights before the fourth day of the week.
Well, he has some explanation in part of the text about demons, which we mark that.
Right, and I'm sure there must be some midrash or story about demons coming out. But on the note here on the side, he says it could be Riviyah. Some maintain is referring to the nights on which a downpour of rain is expected. And that was I think that must be the custom that I heard, that rain of blessing is rain that falls at night, right? Because it doesn't ruin your day. It just falls at night. You need the rain on your fields, but you don't want it to ruin the day when you're trying to either work in the fields or if you just want to enjoy the day. So I like that interpretation. At night during the rainy season, and at night and on Shabbat Eve. Okay, so now we bring in Shimon ben Shetach, and this is going to lead us to Choni. Shekin matzinu b'yemei Shimon ben Shetach sheyardu lahem geshamim b'leilei reviot u'b'leilei Shabbatot. In the days of Shimon ben Shetach, it fell on these proper times. Ad shena'asu chitim kichlot, kichlayot, u'seorim kegarinei zeitim ve'adashim kedinarei zahav. It rained so perfectly in the days of Shimon ben Shetach that the wheat grew as kidneys, and the barley grew as big as olive pits, and lentils were as golden dinars. So that's good. Those were good days. And then to just prove to you that they did it. So you were asking about evidence if these things happened. Well, tsaroru mehem dugma lidorot. So I don't know what museum they put this in, but they tied these things up so that they could show in the future Lahodia kama hachet gorem, to teach you that this is what happens when you don't get, when you sin, you don't get the rain in its proper season. Avonotechem hitu ele vechatotechem manu hatov mikem. So you just should know that if if you guys act properly, then this is the reward that's going to come to the future. Okay, and likewise, and then we found another example of when it rains properly, when things are good, and it rains at its right time. V'chein matzinu b'mei Horodos, that's Herod, shehayu oskim b'vinyan Beit HaMikdash. So Herod, there already was the second temple was standing, but Herod, in an effort to gain support for his kingship, because he wasn't, he was the descendant of forced converts, actually. And he was placed as the king because of his relationship with Rome. And so to build up support among the people that he was ruling, he made the second temple more magnificent than it had originally been. He built it up, and it was supposed to be one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. Anyway, when he was occupied with building building up that Beit HaMikdash, it only rained at night. Lemachar nashva haruach. In the morning, the wind would blow the rain, dry everything up. V'nit pazru ha'avim. The clouds would disperse. V'zarcha hachama, and the sun would come out. V'yatzah ha'am lemalachtam. They were able to do their work. V'yadu shemelechet shamayim bidehem. And that's how they knew that what they were doing was proper. That this was holy work, because the heavens were smiling down on them. Okay, so now we mentioned this Shimon ben Shetach, and now we get a story about Choni HaMagal, who lived at that time. Two stories, actually, two famous stories about him. Maaseh sheshalchu lechoni HaMagal. Oh, this was I forgot. This was in the Mishnah, and we're going to get the fuller story here. Tenu Rabbanan, Pamachat, Yatsa Rov Adar Velo Yardu Geshamim. It was taught that once most of the month of Adar had passed, which is springtime, that's Rampuram, and rain had not fallen. They sent the message to Choni HaMagal, pray and rain will fall. He prayed, but no rain fell. He drew a circle. This is going to be a theme throughout the next couple of pages. Scholars, sages who pray, and it doesn't come. But in this case, he drew a circle. That's why it's called Hama'agal. A ma'agal is a circle. He drew a circle in the dust, and he stood inside it in the manner that the prophet Habakkuk did, as it is stated. And I will stand upon my watch and set myself upon the tower, and I will look out to see what God will say to me and what I shall answer when I am reproved. This verse is taken to mean that Habakkuk fashioned a kind of prison for himself where he sat. So Amar lefanav, so Choni says to God, Ribono shel olam, banecha samu penehem alai, she'ani kiven bayit lefanecha. They've turned to me because they know that I'm like a member of your household, a ben bayit. Nishba ani b'shimcha hagadol, she'eno zaz mikan ad shetirachem al banecha. I've taken an oath, I'm not moving until you are merciful and you bring the rain. Hidchilu gishamim minatfim. So the rain begins to trickle down, right? This little kind of misty rain. Amrulo talmidav, Rabbi, ra'inucha velo namut. His students said, we've seen that you have these abilities, but that's not enough. We're going to die. Kimidu min anu she'ein gishamim yordim ela lahatir shvuatacha. It appears to us that a small amount of rain is falling only to enable you to dissolve your oath, but not nearly enough to save us. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like, so God said, okay, look, I'll get you out of your oath. It's you said that you're not leaving till it rains. I'll send a little bit of rain, you can get out of your oath. But that's not good enough for Choni. Amar lo kach sha'alti. That's not what I asked for. Ele gishmei vorot, shtichin u'ma'arot. The rain to fill the cisterns, the ditches, the caves, right? That's what we saw We saw this earlier, that this was a measurement of rain enough to fill these cisterns, ditches, and caves. That's what you really want, because you need the water for the whole, up until the winter, I guess. Yardu baza'af. So now it came down and really hard. Ad shekol tipa v'tiba kimulo pi chavit. It came down so hard that every drop was the size of a barrel. V'shi'aru hachamim she'ein tipa pechuta milog. And they estimated. The Chachamim estimated that each one was a log in size. I forgot how much a log is, but it's a lot of rain. Amrulo talmidav. Now his students come to him and say, Rabbi, re'inucha velo namut. We've seen that you have this ability, but this is going to kill us. Let us not die. Lo namut. Kimidumin anu she'ein geshamim yordin ela la'abed ha'olam. Because it appears now to us the rain is falling so hard it's going to destroy the world. Amar lefanav. Now he goes back to God. Lo kach sha'alti ela gishmei ratzon. I didn't ask for this. I want desirable rain. How do they translate it here? Rain of benevolence, bracha unidava. Desirable rain, a rain of blessing, a rain of generosity. Yaradu ketiknan, and then it starts to fall appropriately. Ad sha'alu kol ha'am lahar habayit mifnei hageshamim. It rained so much that they had to start going up to the mountains, Har Habayit, the mountain where the temple is, because of the rain. Amrulo Rabbi Kishem Shehit Palta Sheyerdu, just as you've prayed that it should come down. Kachit Palel v'Yelchu lahem. So too pray that they should go away. Amar lahem kach mekubalani she'ein mitpalalin al rov hatova. So this gets us back to what we saw, just the story that preceded it. It's a tradition of mine. This is the tradition I've received, that one doesn't pray for to end the excess of good. You don't pray over an excess of good. You don't say, please stop, right? You never want things to end, because you don't know when the rain will come next. But he says, Afal pichein haviu li par hoda'ah. Bring me a bull, a bull of thanksgiving. Haviu lo par hoda'ah. They brought him a bull of thanksgiving. Samach shtei yadav alav ve'amar lefanav. And he said, as he put his hands on the bull to offer it up, Ribono shel olam, Amcha Yisrael shehotzeita mimitzrayim einan yecholin lo berov tova velo berov puranot. Your nation, whom you brought out of Egypt, cannot bear too much good or too little good, right? Or excess of punishment. Ka'asta alehem. You got angry with them. Einan yecholim la'amod. They're not able to stand. When you become angry with your people, they can't bear it. Hishbata alehem tova. Bring good, influence you. May it be your will. Well, but what's the first part? Okay. Well, anyway, it says here, Hishbata alehem. What's the word I'm looking at? Bestow upon them. Bring upon them good. Einan yecholim. Oh, if you bring upon them too much good, they can't abide it. Ihi ratzon milfanecha sheyipasku hageshamim. May it be your will that the rain stops. V'hei revach ba'olam, and there should be relief in the world. Miyad nashva haruach. The wind blew. V'nitpazru ha'avim. The clouds disperse, v'zarcha hachama, and the sun comes out. V'yatzua am lasadeh v'hevi lehem kemehin ufitri ot. They came out and truffles. They came out and they've gathered for themselves truffles and mushrooms, because of course the rain was there, and these things grew. Oh, so it was wonderful. Shalach lo Shimon ben Shetach. This is Shimon ben Shetach, who is understood to be the head rabbi of this time. And he sends him a message. Ilmalei choni ata, if you weren't choni, Goes Reini alecha nidue. I put you in. I would ostracize you. She'ilu shanim kishnei Eliyahu shemifatachot geshamim biyado shel Eliyahu. For were these years like the years of Elijah, when the keys of rain were entrusted into Elijah's hands, and he swore it would not rain? Wouldn't the name of heaven have been desecrated by your oath not to leave the circle until it rained? Once you've pronounced this oath, either yours or once you have pronounced this oath, either yours or Elijah's must be falsified. Well, I don't know, but the fear is that if you had made this oath, there's a fear. What if the rain hadn't come? You made this big deal, and if the rain doesn't come, then it demoralizes people. So don't take that risk. But what can I do? What can I do to you? You sin, you do the wrong thing before God. And he does for you your will, your bidding. It's like a son who sins before his father. He messes around. He does what his father says not to do. And the father gives in to him in any case. Ve'omerlo, Abba holicheni lirachatzeni b'chamin, shatfeni bitzonein, Tainli egozim, shkedim, afarsekim, verimonim, binotenlo. Right? He's like this spoiled kid. I mean, the father spoils his child terribly. He says, give me a hot bath and cool me off in cool water, wash me in cool water. Give me egozim or what are egozim? They're nuts, but yeah, I guess they're just plain nuts. Shkedim are almonds, afarsekim are peaches, rimonim are pomegranates. And he just gives it to you, right? I mean, the kid is constantly demanding, and the father gives in. Ve'alecha hakatuv omer yismach avicha v'imecha v'tagel yoladetecha. Your father and mother will be glad, and she who bore you will rejoice. We'll get to the end of the story here. Tanu Rabbanan, mashalchu b'nei lishkat hagazit lechoni magal. What did the members of the chambers of the hewn stone, that is the great Sanhedrin, right? This is that Shimon ben Shetach was ahead of this group, this known as the Great Sanhedrin. What did they send to him in terms of a message? V'tigzar omer v'yakom lach ve'al drachecha nagaor. You shall also decree a matter, it shall be established for you, and the light shall shine upon your ways. When they cast down, you will say there is lifting up, for God saves the humble person. God will deliver the one who is not innocent, and he will be delivered through the cleanness of your hands. Atagazarta milmata v'hakadosh baruch hu mikayem ma'amarcha milmala. You make a decree below, and God fulfills it from above. Ve'al drachecha nagaor. What is that? The light shall shine upon your ways. Dor shahaya afel he'arta bitfilatecha. A generation that was in darkness, you illuminated it with your prayer. Okay, one last piece here. Ki hishpil v'tomar geva. When they cast down, you will say there is lifting up. A generation that cast down, you lifted it up with your prayer. For he saves the humble person. A generation that was humble in its transgressions, you saved it through your prayer. He will deliver the one who was not innocent. A generation that was not innocent, you have delivered it through your prayer, and you will be delivered through the cleanness of your hands. You have delivered an undeserving generation through the clean work of your hands. Okay, the importance of the righteous guy to do all this. So what do you make of this story? We talked about it once before when we saw it in the Mishnah, but I think it's so fascinating here that you have this case of this Choni Magal guy who basically, I mean, this is what we call theurgy, right? He is invoking God. He's causing the divine source to bend to his will. And yet we have Shimon ben Shetach saying, really, that's not cool. But what am I supposed to do? So what do you think the message is here? The theological message that's being sent?
Before one thing that struck me in this is I think Shimon's argument about Elijah is a sort of a weak one.
Yeah.
You know, what if it were such and such, but what if it were not? And he slides, at least as it's reported here, he slides from saying, what if it were so and so, to it was. You know, he
Yeah.
practically says that this was like Elijah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it isn't right. There's a comparison here with Elijah. Because look, Elijah is a problematic character too.
Yeah.
What you know, one of the reasons why, one of the explanations given why Elijah is at every bris, right? That's the tradition. We invoke Elijah at every bris, Brit Milah, and one of the explanation is because during this period when the people were not, the people of Israel were following foreign gods, and Elijah was fighting with them as well as the foreigners, and was making these decrees about rain and the like. And he runs off to the famous cave, you know, where the still small voice is heard. He says, God, in that passage, God says, you know, what are you doing here? And he says, well, the people don't accept you, and you know, I'm the only person who is following your covenant. And God, and the reason why then Elijah has to be at every Brit Milah is because God's angry at him for saying that. That's so arrogant of you, and you've given up on the Jewish people. So therefore, every time there's a Brit Milah, you got to show up. You got to, it's your punishment. So yeah, so we have this, you know, so Elijah's kind of is a complicated character, and so is Choni HaMa'agal in this story.
It seems to me that they mentioned you really shouldn't have done that, but now that you have, I think it's sort of a it's not a good way to put it, but that almost political opportunity. Like, now that things have worked out, I can attach my approval to it and sort of make it, you know, either not hindsight, but sort of post event, you know, decree that it was okay that you did that, even though you really shouldn't have, and you get a wag of the finger. But because it all worked out, sort of no harm, no foul, I guess. And I think and I think just that sort of public reminder, since, I mean, it's not really chronological, but at least in terms of Ta'anit, this is the second time that somebody's done this.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a lot of with a lot of the stuff, some of it has more just the general humbleness lessons, while others, especially when they bring up Elijah, is sort of not an anti-messianic message, but a please nobody get too full of themselves, nobody follow this guy around like he's the Messiah. That, you know, just a reminder to bring everybody back. You know, what he did wasn't, yes, it worked out, and that's great. Please understand it's an exception. He's special, but he can't be that special. You know, we're still waiting for some, you know, I think sometimes when they get into these situations where things have worked out, the sages kind of, okay, but you're not the Messiah. Like, let's all get this. Was it Monty Python? He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. You know, that sort of, like, that's how it kind of reads to me. Sort of a reminder to the people. Don't follow him too much. Yeah. Yes, it's great, but
that's very interesting. Okay, so, you know, I think it's one of the things that the scholars of Talmud rather are looking at Talmud is from literary theory, and some of the theorists are suggesting that we look at least some chapters like this one as an entire literary unit. It's not, you know, when weeks go through it, it seems like there's a bunch of little stories that are all attached to each other, some complementary themes, some are out of left field. And some are arguing, an article I've been reading by Dvorah Steinmetz argues that this whole chapter is actually edited in a certain way to be a literary unit. And there are things that we see keep coming up. So this idea that rain that and we're going to see it more in the next page, the scholar asks for rain, rain doesn't come. Maybe eventually it will come, but it doesn't come when he first asks. And in this case, Choni doesn't give up, right? He gets very irritated, like, I'm going to keep working at this until the rain comes. But so there's like the element of surprise. Choni himself, the name Choni, we've seen, and we will see also that the names like Choni, we saw, oh, maybe that's on the next page too. Anyway, the name Chana comes up, Chanina comes up, Nahum comes up. All these names are all very similar, and they all come from the root chen, which is compassion. And we've seen that too, that arrogance does not win you favors, but humility does. And in this story, that seems to be what Shimon ben Shetach is saying to Choni. Watch the arrogance there, buddy, because it's that's not going to win us any favors. Now, here's the second story of Choni, and this is another great one. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is a story told by Rabbi Yochanan, who is several generations after Choni would have lived. Kol yamav shel otot tzadik hayam mitzta'er al mikra zeh shir ma'alot b'shuva et shivat Zion hayinu kecholmim. Choni was always troubled by this verse in Psalm 126, which is the introduction to Birkat Hamazon on Shabbat. And he says, when God brought back those who returned to Zion, it was 70 years later, after the destruction of the first temple and the Babylonian exile, Jews start to come back 70 years later. We were like those who dream. So he said, is there really a person who can sleep and dream for 70 years? How is it, why are they comparing the 70-year exile in Babylonia to a dream? Okay, so now we begin the story. Yom Echad, Hava Azal Ba'orcha. One day, this is very interesting too. This story is told in Aramaic. The story before we had was in Hebrew. I don't know what that says about when the stories were told, but it's just kind of interesting. Hebrew is the language of the Mishnah, and Aramaic is the language of the Talmud. Anyway, one day he was walking along the road when he saw a certain man planting a carob tree, and Choni said to him, "This tree, after how many years will it bear fruit?" Right? Because carob trees take a long time to bear fruit. The man said to him, "It will not produce fruit for 70 years." Choni said to him, "Is it obvious to you that you will live 70 years, that you're going to benefit from the tree?" And the man said to him, the man himself found a world full of I found the world full of carob trees, just as my ancestors planted it for me. I'm planting for my descendants. Okay. He goes off, Choni Yatevka Karech Rifta. He goes off and eats some bread. And Atale Shenta Nim, he fell asleep. A cliff formed around him, and he disappeared from sight and slept for 70 years, the original Rip Van Winkle. When he awoke, he saw a certain man gathering carobs from that tree. And Choni was amazed. "Are you the one who planted the tree?" And the man said to him, "I am the grandson, the son's son." Choni said to him, "I learned from this that I must have slept for 70 years. And indeed, he saw that his donkey had sired several herds during those many years. How the donkey did it by himself, I don't know. But Azal levete amar lahu, brei de Choni hama'agal mikeam. He went home and he said to the members of his household, "Is the son of Choni hama'agal alive?" And they said to him, "No, his son is no longer with us, but his son's son, his grandson, is alive." He said to them, "Oh, I'm Choni hama'agal." They didn't believe him. He went to the study hall where he heard the sages say about one scholar, "His halachot are as enlightening and as clear as in the years of Choni hama'agal. For when Choni hama'agal would enter the study hall, he would resolve for the sages any difficulty they had." Choni said to them, "I'm Choni hama'agal," but they didn't believe him, right? I mean, 70 years ago, what are you talking about? And they didn't pay him proper respect. This is also an issue we see in this chapter. Chalash da'ate, he was very upset. His mind was weakened. Ba'e rachme, he prayed for mercy, umit, and he died. And in the end, Rava said, Hainu de amre inche. This is like a folk saying that o chavruta o mituta, either friendship or death. And that's the end of this story. Now, there are so many things going on in this story. I just love it. What do you think the point of the story is?
I mean, they bring up generation a lot, but I think as far as that ending sort of moral of the story has to do with community more than that literal translation of friendship or death.
Mm-hmm.
Building things for a community and for the future is really the only way. And if you're not doing that, you're better off dead, so to speak.
Mm.
Since the carob tree is planted for future generations, he goes to find his son, and he's not helpful though with that sort of time jump or quantum leap or whatever, friendship or death, that sort of, if you do things for the benefit, it's great. If not, there's no point. Literally none.
Good. All right, very good. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure here because it strikes me there's a little bit of a disconnect between the story of Honi and and Rava is saying this explains the folk saying.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, there's so many pieces here. Like the first part of the story has been taken over by Jewish environmentalists.
Yeah.
It is, we hear this every Tu B'Shvat. This is a story that's told.
Pretty straightforward.
Right, exactly. We've got to take care of the future. There's the issue once again of, what hurts him seems to be, it's hard to tell. Is it that he's, the closing line by Rava makes it sound like, and I think about this as people are living longer and, people who are blessed with long life, they die in their 90s or even 100. And very few people come to the funeral because there's nobody left. Their contemporaries are all gone, unless they have, a lot of family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. But otherwise, if it's, they don't have a lot of contemporaries. And so there's always the joke about, you've outlived your friends. So that's what it seems to be like, either that he dies because he's alone in the world. He's lived past where he should have. On the other hand, it seems before Rava gives the closing statement, it seems that what really ticked him off was people didn't believe him and they didn't pay him proper respect. I mean, they quote him in the study hall, but when he says, "I'm Honi," they say, "Get out of here, you're not Honi." And that he was insulted by that. Is it about, that this is a problem for people when we expect honor and respect and they don't give it to us, and we're hurt, and we, that causes his demise. Is that there's,
somehow he becomes very upset. He prays for mercy.
Right.
Now that must be, this has really hurt me.
Yeah.
And the mercy is that he dies.
Right, exactly. He doesn't want to be in the world anymore. And
his time has passed.
Right. So I think that there's so many elements to this story. You could use it in so many different ways that, but it's just interesting that knowing and meeting with people who have been blessed with long life, as they await death, they almost welcome it, some of them. I know my mother did. To me, it's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought of this 25 years ago. I wouldn't have thought of this as the key to the story. But it's just interesting how as things, you experience things, you read these stories differently. And this one is so rich. That it has so many pieces to it. Well, we
And
learned, yeah.
also, what would you do if some Shabbat morning somebody showed up and you were teaching something or other and he announced he was Coney?
Wait, and Choni announced?
Well, yeah, if someone showed up
Tony shows up at Sinai.
and you're teaching, maybe you're teaching this story. He announces, I'm Coney.
I'd say, you know what? I think you got to pray for mercy.
Yeah.
Your time has passed. You got no friends left. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting. So since they mentioned his grandson, it's kind of interesting. And right away, we have stories about the grandsons. And this is another wild story. Abba Chilkiah bar Berei Dahoni Hama'agal Hava. He was the grandson of Honi Hama'agal. And he also had this power to bring rain. And this is an interesting one because all these weird things happen in the story, which we're not given an explanation to. But then at the end, you don't have to interpret it because the rabbis get the explanations of these weird things anyway. So they're given to us. But at the first part, it's kind of mysterious. What's he doing? So what did he do? The world was in need of rain. They would send sages to him, and he would pray for mercy, and the rain would fall. Well, once the world was in need of rain, and the sages sent a pair of sages to him so that he would pray for mercy and rain would fall. They went to his house, but they did not find him there. They went to the field and found him hoeing on the ground, and they greeted him. But he velo asbar lehu apeh. He didn't return their greetings. Toward evening, so he's sitting there, like standing there, and he's not talking to him. Toward evening, and he was gathering firewood. He placed the wood and hoe on one shoulder and his cloak on the other shoulder. Along the entire way, he did not wear his shoes. But when he reached water, he put on his shoes. When he reached an area filled with shrubs and thorns, he lifted up his clothes. But when he reached the city, his wife came out to greet him, adorned with finery. When he reached his house, his wife entered first. He entered afterward, and afterward, the two sages entered, which I guess is unusual. You know, you're welcoming visitors. You should let them come in first. He sat and ate bread, but he did not say to the sages, come and eat, as was customary and polite. He divided bread to his children. To the elder, he gave one piece, but to the younger one, he gave two. Okay, that's, I guess, you usually give the older one, the bigger one, more food. Abba Chilkiah said to his wife, I know that these sages have come due to the rain. Let us go up to the roof and pray for mercy. Perhaps the Holy One will be appeased and it will rain, and we will not receive credit, and we won't receive the credit for the rainfall, right? Because we won't have been asked and then use up our credit. We've seen this already, right? We won't use up our credit by bringing the rain. They went up to the roof. He stood in one corner. She stood in the other corner. Clouds began to form on the side where his wife stood. When he descended, he said to the sages, why have the sages come? They said to him, the sages have sent us to the master so that you should pray for mercy for rain. He said to them, blessed is God who did not require you to petition, to ask Abba Chilkiah, because hey, you know what? Rain is coming. Okay, so they said to him, we know that the rain has come on the master's account. So, you say that it's not because of you, it's just coming, but we know it's you. But please explain the strange actions that we just saw. What are these puzzling actions that you did? See here it says, so not only are the actions of Abba Chilkiah baffling, but they also conflict with proper norms of behavior. You should be careful to extend greetings to all people. You should avoid physical harm, not walk after, that was the issue, not walk after a woman. Okay. So why did he do all these things? Well, here are the answers. He said to them, I'm a day laborer hired for the day. And I said to myself that I may not delay my work to answer you. They further inquired, okay, and what's the reason that the master carried the firewood on one shoulder and his cloak on the other shoulder? He said it was a borrowed robe. I borrowed it for this purpose, to wear it. I did not borrow it for that purpose, to place wood on it. So I wanted to, keep it clean. The sages continued to, okay, the next question. What's the reason that the entire way the master did not wear shoes, but when he reached the water, he put on his shoes? Well, the entire way I can see and take care where I walk, and therefore there's no need for me to wear my shoes. But in the water, I can't see. Therefore, I put on my shoes to avoid hurting myself. Okay, what is the reason that when the master reached shrubs and thorns, he lifted up his clothes? The flesh will heal if it is scratched by thorns, but this garment will not heal if it is torn. Okay, next question. What's the reason for that the master reached the city? The master's wife came out adorned in her finery. He answered them, she dresses that way so that when I walk through the city, I will not set my eyes upon another woman. Well, what's the reason that she entered first and afterward the master entered and only afterward we entered? Because you have not been checked by me. I cannot be sure how you will act, and therefore I did not want you to be alone with my wife. What's the reason then when the master ate bread, you didn't invite us to eat? Well, it's because there's not enough bread for guests, and I said to myself that I should not gain credit from the sages for nothing. By offering you food, I cannot serve you. That's actually another teaching where you're not supposed to. It's sinful to, if you know that somebody can't come to your house, they're busy, but you want to get credit for inviting them. You're not supposed to say, "Oh, why don't you come over to my house Friday night for dinner?" You don't really want them to come, and then you say, but you invite them knowing that they're going away for the weekend. That's unacceptable. So here, you didn't want to get. We don't have enough food. I didn't want to offer you food and then not be able to then have you say, "Oh no, we're fine." And you say, "Thanks, I don't have any because I didn't have food anyway." What's the reason the master gave the older child one piece but the younger child two? He said to them, the older child stays at home, and if he's hungry, he can eat at any time. But the younger one sits and studies in the synagogue, and therefore he's hungrier. All right, what is the reason that the clouds began to form on that side where the master's wife stood before your own side? He explained, because my wife is frequently at home and she gives bread to the poor, and therefore her provision of benefit to the need is immediate. Soon after the rains fall, she is able to provide the needy with provisions. Accordingly, her prayers are answered without delay. In contrast, I give money to the poor, and consequently, the benefit of my gift is not immediate. It takes a lot of time before the rain results. Alternatively, her prayers may have been answered first because when certain hooligans were living in our neighborhood, I prayed that they should die, but she prayed they should repent, and they repented. And so, all right, so we get all the answer to all of these stories. Any thoughts on this?
Sort of with other things that the sages have something to learn. It's come up that, normal, like you had said, the sages tend to be, Torah studies peak, sages are the highest authority, and yet here they have something to learn. And it goes along just like with the blood letter and other stuff, people who do the most they can, even though it's not as you would expect, they get these favors. It's better for them because they've done well for them. Even she is a woman. I'm sure that probably was something that was surprising to them as well. She's a woman. Why is, you're a man. Shouldn't you have more power to do things? And she's like, well, because she's better at stuff. So of course she can do it better,
Yeah, I think that surprise is really important in this story. That we've seen, and this is something that this Devorah Steinmetz points out, that number of these stories are reversal of fortune or surprise stories. So we, the reader, are surprised. He does all these weird things. Why is he acting this way? Oh, well, there's actually a rational reason for each of these things. I think it also teaches us that the idea that, always give a person the benefit of the doubt, that he didn't offer them food. You'd say, wow, what a rude person. Well, there was a reason for it. There was actually a legitimate reason. Why did he, oh, and also I think that tzedakah, I thought that was fascinating, that the concept that actually giving food to the poor is more powerful than money. Both are obviously necessary and important, but giving food, since it's an immediate benefit to a person in need, is actually greater than even money. There is definitely are teachings that gimilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, are a higher order of tzedakah than money, because for a number of reasons. But one of them is that with gimilut chasadim, as in this case, it's providing immediate need.
That's sort of an interesting thing too, because in the modern era, at least, we find that sometimes that's not right. That when there are disasters, the relief organizations often ask for money rather than gifts in kind.
That's true. That's true. And that's, I think, an issue of efficiency.
Yes.
Right? Because it's not good. But I think if on the street.
When we're on the street, that's a different situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I also love this ending. There's a very famous story, same exact idea, about Rabbi Meir and his wife Bruria. Bruria was one of the few known women in the Talmud and is known as a great scholar. And a number of stories about her and her relationship with Rabbi Meir. And one of the stories tells us it's the closing verse of Psalm 104. What's the whole verse? It's that there should be no chata'im left in the world. So there was once the same thing. There were hooligans living in the neighborhood, and Rabbi Meir was going to pray that they should be destroyed by God. And she said to them, wait a minute, you've got this verse. It says, Chata'im min ha'aretz. It said, we want to get rid of the sins from the earth, not the sinners. And therefore, you should pray that they repent. And he follows his wife's advice, and they repent. And just like in this story. So it's very interesting. You have a couple of stories here where it's the wife who is telling the husband, the scholar, right? The one who's the scholar, that the goal is to get people to change and be better. The husband wants, removal. He wants to destroy wickedness. It's the wife who says that the way you destroy wickedness is to get people to be better. And that's the winning argument. I think that's terrific.
Here the wife is not named, although she's the one who wins the arguments.
Exactly. It's very, a lot of times we see this in the Talmud, it's a shame, but the women are not given names. And yet in this case, you're absolutely right. She's and he, it's not only that we, the reader, recognize this, but the Abba Chilkiah acknowledges his wife, who is the real tzaddiket. So it is, but it's unfortunate that we don't get names of these women. They're known as the wife of, Okay, here's another story of a grandson of Choni HaMagal, another guy who's really good with rain. When the world was in need of rain, the sages would send school children to him, and they would grab him by the hem of his cloak and say, Abba, Abba, hav lan mitra, Father, Father, bring us rain. And that would motivate him to pray for rain. Actually responding to God, saying, God, you're the Father. You're the ultimate Father who can provide rain, and the Father who cannot provide rain. Act on behalf of these children who could not distinguish between their father in heaven and their actual father. Okay. The Gemara asks, why was he called Hanan HaNechba? Because he would hide. Machbi, lechabot is to hide. He would hide himself in the lavatory, in the Beit HaKisei, in the bathroom. So, because he was so modest, he didn't want people running after him all the time. So, Choni HaMagal and Hanan and Choni are same source, same root of compassion. But whereas Choni was a little bit more arrogant, we see that Abba Chilkiah and Hanan, his grandchildren, were very, very modest. But they also had this power to bring rain. now we get a little piece about the difference between those who bring rain in Eretz Yisrael and those who bring rain in Babylonia. The pious men of Babylonia, this is Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, these are Talmudic generation rabbis. When the world is in need of rain, they would say, let us assemble together and pray for mercy. And perhaps the Holy One, Efshar, perhaps, possibly, the Holy One will be appeased and bring rain. Rather, on the other hand, in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yonah, who was the father of Rabbi Mani, which we'll get to in a moment, he acted differently. When the world was in need of rain, he enters his house and says to his household, I need my sack, and I'll go and buy myself a dinar of grain. When he went outside, he went and stood in a low place, as it is said, out of the depths I will call you, O Lord. And he would stand in a secluded place and cover himself with sackcloth, and he would pray for mercy, and rain would come. Then he'd come home and he would say, and they would say to him, oh, did you bring grain? And he said, since the rain has now come, there will be relief in the world and the prices will go down. We didn't have to spend all this money for grain and stock up. So interesting comparison between the two. Babylonians say, let's all get together, let's call the community together and pray for rain. And also the prayer was, maybe God will bring rain. You know, they don't want to be too sure, so they're a little more humble. Whereas in Eretz Yisrael, also humility on Rabbi Yoni's part, but they have the superheroes. They don't call together the community. It's just the superhero of the generation. Rabbi Yonah, in this case, goes out and brings rain on his own. And then I love these stories about Rabbi Mani. The Gemara relates to Rabbi Mani, Rabbi Yonah was his father, was persecuted by the members of the house of the Nasi. Now, the Nasi at this point in third, fourth generation, it's what they know as the patriarch. He was the head of he might have been a rabbi, but he was definitely the civic leader of the Jewish community at this time. Israel, the Jews didn't control their own fate. They were overseen by the Romans or by, might have been the Persians, or what maybe was the Byzantine era. So they would, and they were in charge. They were the civic leaders. So he was being persecuted by members of the house of the Nasi. Not exactly sure what that means. And he would go to his father's grave and he would say, Father, Hani mitza'aruli. Very interesting. It's a very similar to what up here we had Hanan HaNechba, who would call out to God, or the children would call out to God. That same phrase, Abba, Abba. Anyway, one day the men were passing there by the grave where he was praying to his father, and the legs of their horses became stuck in the ground, and they realized it was because they had been persecuting Rabbi Mani, and they stopped doing that. Then a little later, Rabbi Mani was frequently found before Rabbi Yitzhak ben Eliashiv, who was a miracle worker. And once Rabbi Mani said to him, the wealthy members of my father-in-law's house are persecuting me. Rabbi Yitzhak said, may they become poor, so they don't treat you badly anymore, right? They get a taste of their own medicine. And they became poor. Sometime later, Rabbi Mani said to his teacher, now that they're poor, now they're pressuring me to help them. Okay, Rabbi Yitzhak said, you know what? Let it go back to the way it was. May they become rich again. And indeed, they became rich. Now, another time he goes to Rabbi Yitzhak ben Eliashiv, my wife is not acceptable to me. And Seindel understands this to mean she's not good looking. Well, what's her name? Chana. Now here again, we have that name, Chana, Choni, Hanan. Rabbi Yitzhak declared, let Chana grow beautiful. And she became beautiful. But after a while, Rabbi Mani went back to him and he said, now she's good looking and she acts haughtily towards me because she's so good looking and I'm not. He said to him, okay, if so, let Chana return to her homely appearance. And she returned to her homely appearance. And finally, the last story about Rabbi Yitzhak ben Eliashiv is there were two students who were once sitting before Rabbi Yitzhak ben Eliashiv and said to him, let the master pray for mercy on our behalf, that we should become very wise. And he said to him, I used to have that power. I used to pray for these things, but I sent it away, because we can see from these stories, it doesn't necessarily help. You got to work for these benefits. And I think we'll end here, right? This is the end. Okay, so we'll talk about Rabbi Yossi Bar Avi next week. So what do you make of this last story about this guy, Rabbi Mani?
I think going from the story before it, where the husband prays for like the removal of the people while she prays for repentance, it's the same kind of thing where he didn't ask that they stop persecuting him or that they get over themselves. He wants them to be poor, or he wants her to be beautiful instead of accepting her for however she looks or whatever it is that maybe he does. If it's not attractiveness, it's something else. But instead of they're praying for removal instead of an actual solution. One thing I did find interesting was, before those stories, they mention powerful men in Israel and only pious men in Babylonia.
Wow.
Which is, and you were like superheroes, in that individuals versus a group community effort, I think is a big theme of everything. Babylonia, I guess, has that figured out more or something, or at least they have their fables tend to lean more towards community effort instead of one person doing everything.
Yeah, I think, that's a good point, right? Because it's the Bavel, where they work together, where they call the community together, they're considered the Hasidim. They're given that appellation, whereas in Eretz Yisrael with Rabbi Yonah, who's like a one-man guy, I'll do it all myself, he's considered Takifei, powerful, strong. So yeah, there does seem to be a little difference there. That's interesting. Yes, good call. I think these stories also about Rabbi Mani are what the message seems to be is the problem isn't solved if you ask for the situation, the object to be changed. You can only change yourself, right? It doesn't help to ask whether the father-in-law's house is wealthy or poor, you got the same problem. You got to learn how to deal with that. Whether your wife is homely or good looking, it's the issue is you, buddy, not your wife. And that's kind of what it seems that Rabbi Yitzhak ben Eliashib finally realized. It doesn't help to change the order of the world. This doesn't help anybody. These two students wanted to just make us smart. You know what? If you want to be smart, study harder. So I like that message, but very interesting story. It's just funny to me that this poor Rabbi Mani, he is always being persecuted. Never met a guy who's feels persecuted by everybody. Anyway, all right, very good. Well, we'll keep going next week. We got some more really, really interesting stories, and we will pick it up next week. Everybody have a good Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Gabrielle, make sure to be nice to your mom.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Everybody have a good week. Take care.
Visiting your daughter and her family.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.